Have you ever met someone who, when their birthday comes around, everything just feels flat? No Instagram stories, no countdowns, no subtle hints. Even when you say, "Happy birthday," they reply with a quick, "Oh yeah, thanks," and then immediately move on to something else like, "So, where are we getting lunch?" And in your head you start wondering, do they even realize today is their birthday? Or could that person actually be you? You wake up already knowing today is supposed to be a special date, but quietly hoping the day will just pass quickly. You feel a little awkward when people start making a fuss, getting loud, getting excited, treating today like it has to be celebrated in a big way. Because honestly, to you, it doesn't have to be that dramatic. You feel pretty neutral about it, maybe even slightly uncomfortable with the sudden attention. But don't worry, this isn't a story about cold people. It's not about being ungrateful, and it's definitely not about being anti-happiness. Behind that it's no big deal attitude toward birthdays, there's actually a deeper layer of psychology at play. And often, this attitude is more honest about who someone really is than big parties, expensive cakes, or loud celebrations. So let's take a little look inside their head. There's a first type that often gets misunderstood. People who treat their birthday just like any other day. Not because they don't care, but because they're uncomfortable being the center of attention. Imagine you're at the office. Suddenly the lights go out, candles are lit, everyone stands up, claps, and sings a slightly off-key, slightly forced version of Happy Birthday. All eyes are on one person. That person smiles, but the smile is stiff. Their hands don't know where to go. Should I stand or sit? Their head is full of thoughts. How big should my smile be? Do I look awkward right now? Can they tell I'm actually uncomfortable? What am I supposed to say after this? For this type of person, birthdays aren't about happiness. They're about exposure, about being put under a spotlight, about becoming the center of attention they never asked for. Psychologically, people like this tend to be highly sensitive to social evaluation. That doesn't mean they're deeply insecure or have low self-esteem. It just means they're very aware of other people's presence and how they're being perceived. They feel safer blending into the background than standing under bright lights. If this is you, you probably say things like, "I just don't like the fuss." But what you're really looking for is something simple: peace and quiet. Then there's the next type, the one who seems mature, sometimes a little too mature, the kind of person who, when their birthday arrives, doesn't feel excited at all. Instead, their mind fills up with heavy thoughts. I'm getting older. Time is running out. Where should my life be by now? This is the reflective type. For them, a birthday isn't a celebration, it's an existential checkpoint. One day a year where you're forced to look at a number, and that number immediately triggers comparisons. Comparisons with people your age, with the version of yourself you imagined 5 years ago, with expectations that still haven't fully been met. That's why they often choose to treat their birthday like any other day. Not because they don't care, but because if it's celebrated too much, their head just gets more crowded and heavier. If every birthday brings you more thoughts than laughter, this might be you. But there's also another type, quieter, more withdrawn. From the outside, they seem chill, neutral, with a casual, "it's whatever." But behind that attitude, there's usually a history. Maybe their birthdays were often forgotten or celebrated half-heartedly, or they kept ending in small disappointments, canceled plans, people who didn't show up, expectations that never quite matched reality. Psychologically, this is a form of self-protection, a survival mechanism. Because the brain learns one simple lesson: hoping is risky. If you don't hope, you won't be disappointed. If you say, "It's no big deal," you don't open the door for the same kind of hurt to come back again. They don't not care. They've just learned that caring too much comes with risks. If this is you, you might smile when you see other people being celebrated in big ways. But deep down, you feel safer staying on the sidelines. Then, there's the type that often gets labeled as the coldest one. The kind of person who calmly says, birthdays are just a social construct. And honestly, they're not entirely wrong. This type tends to be rational, emotionally minimalist, and very selective about what they assign meaning to. They're not against happiness, they just don't like happiness that feels scheduled by a calendar. For them, meaning in life doesn't show up once a year. Meaning can show up on a random Wednesday afternoon while having coffee alone, or on a Tuesday night when you finally feel at peace with yourself. So celebrating a birthday feels arbitrary. Why that day? Why does it have to be loud? Why the same ritual every single year? If this is you, you might value small, intimate moments more than big celebrations. And that's not a flaw. It's just a way of living. But here's the twist. Sometimes, the people who treat their birthday like any other day are actually the most emotionally independent. They don't wait for external validation to feel worthy. They don't need a celebration to know their life has meaning. That sense of meaning can come from healthy self-esteem or from a long process of learning to make peace with who they are. But if we're being honest, sometimes that attitude also comes from the habit of holding yourself back for too long. That's why it's important to be honest about one thing. When you treat your birthday like a normal day, is it because you genuinely feel comfortable with that, or because you've gotten used to lowering your expectations? The difference is subtle, but the impact is huge. So now I want to ask you, when your birthday comes around, what do you actually feel? Are you the type who wants the day to just pass as quickly as possible? Or the type who secretly hopes someone will remember but pretends not to care? Or maybe you really are relaxed and happy with your own way of doing things. There's no wrong answer, because the way someone views their birthday is often a reflection of how they view themselves. And maybe understanding that is the most honest birthday gift you can give yourself. If you pause for a moment there and get really honest with yourself, the answer is often not as simple as, "I'm fine with it." Behind that phrase, there can be a lot of things you've never really given yourself space to feel. Not because you're incapable of feeling them, but because you've gotten used to just moving past them. Interestingly, the way someone treats their birthday often mirrors the way they treat their own emotions. People who are used to suppressing their feelings tend to minimize the meaning of moments. People who are used to being independent tend to reject dependence, and people who've been disappointed too often learn not to hope. All of these patterns show up clearly on one day called a birthday. There's another layer that doesn't get talked about much: control. For some people, not celebrating their birthday is a subtle way of staying in control of themselves. Because the moment a birthday is celebrated, unspoken expectations appear. You're supposed to be happy, you're supposed to smile, you're supposed to look like you're enjoying it, you're supposed to respond to other people's attention in the right way. But human feelings don't always run on a schedule. They don't always obey what the calendar says is a special day. By treating their birthday like any other day, it's as if they're saying, "I don't have to feel anything just because today is labeled special." And honestly, that stance is valid. But on the other hand, control taken too far can turn into a wall. A wall so high that even small, sincere gestures can't get through. Not because no one cares, but because everything gets deflected before it's ever felt. This is where it's important to realize one thing. This isn't about whether you should or shouldn't celebrate your birthday. It's about the motive behind that choice. Because there are people who look calm, strong, and very self-sufficient on the outside, but are actually tired on the inside, tired of always feeling like they have to be enough on their own. For this type of person, birthdays quietly become a reminder that they rarely give themselves permission to be cared for, to be noticed, to be celebrated without feeling guilty about it. Not because they don't want that care, but because they feel like they're not supposed to need it. And again, this isn't a fault. It's just a pattern that forms slowly over time. There are also people who seem indifferent on the surface, but are actually very emotionally sensitive. They can feel the intention behind every word. They know which kind of attention is genuine and which is just polite formality. And because of that, they become very selective. For them, one message that's genuinely heartfelt means more than 10 fleeting Instagram stories. So when they say, "You don't have to celebrate it," it's not because they don't want anything at all, but because they want something real, something that actually feels alive. Unfortunately, this attitude often gets mistaken for being cold or indifferent, when in reality, they're just being honest about their own emotional standards. There's also another type, People who have given in too many times, adapted too often, and become the version of themselves that's easiest for others to accept. Eventually, their birthday turns into a day with no requests, a day where they don't want to expect anything, don't want to wait for anyone, and don't want to open themselves up to disappointment again. For them, the absence of celebration doesn't feel like emptiness. It actually feels like calm. No expectations means no hurt. But what often goes unnoticed is one simple yet important question. Is that calm truly peaceful, or is it just emotional numbness? Because there's a very thin line between peace and numbness, between independence and emotional shutdown, between not needing anything and not daring to receive. Birthdays, without us realizing it, tend to magnify that line. They force us to see it, even if only for a moment. That's why many people feel strange after their birthday has passed. Not sad, not happy, just empty. Not because no one cared, but because there's a part of themselves that's been ignored for too long. At this point, it's important to say this clearly. Not celebrating your birthday isn't a problem. Not wanting attention isn't a weakness. The problem is when the phrase, "it's no big deal," becomes a shield to cover up feelings that were never given the space to be processed. Because emotions that aren't given room don't disappear. They just wait. They wait for a quieter moment to surface, and often they show up as unexplained exhaustion or a sense of emptiness that's hard to put into words. Maybe in the end, birthdays aren't about candles, cake, or long messages at all. Maybe a birthday is a small mirror that gets placed in front of us once a year, quietly asking, "Are you still being honest with yourself? Are you actually okay, or have you just gotten used to looking okay?" And again, there's no single right answer. There's no one healthiest way that applies to everyone. What matters is awareness of where your choices are coming from comfort or from self-protection, from peace or from exhaustion. Because once you're aware, you have the freedom to choose again, not to become someone else, but to choose in a way that's more honest with yourself. And maybe that's already more than enough. So now the question is no longer whether you should celebrate your birthday or not. The question becomes, how do you actually want to treat yourself? Because often, the real issue isn't the party, isn't the cake, and isn't who shows up or who doesn't. The deeper issue is the relationship you have with yourself. If you're starting to notice that you often minimize moments, quickly saying, "It's not important," and choosing to move past days that actually carry personal meaning, then maybe the question you need to ask isn't, "Why don't I like birthdays?" but, "In what other areas of my life do I do the same thing?" Because patterns rarely show up in just one place. People who are used to lowering their expectations on their birthday often do the same in relationships, in personal dreams, and in their own emotional needs. Not because they don't have desires, but because they've learned too many times that hoping isn't always safe, that hope sometimes ends in disappointment. So the first step isn't celebrating, it's acknowledging. Acknowledging that there's a part of you that actually wants to be seen, wants to be remembered, and wants to be considered important. And that desire doesn't make you needy, doesn't make you too much, and doesn't make you weak. On the contrary, it means you're strong enough to be honest with yourself. After that, the next step doesn't have to be a big or dramatic change. It's not about suddenly throwing yourself a party or forcing yourself to become a version of you that doesn't feel authentic. Sometimes all that's needed is a small permission slip. Permission to pause for a moment on that day. Permission to not be productive. Permission to reflect. Or permission to enjoy something without needing to justify it. For some people, that might mean having a good meal alone. For others, it could mean writing, sitting in silence, or even sleeping in without guilt. Because at its most honest core, the essence of a birthday isn't about being celebrated by other people, but about whether you acknowledge your own existence. This also applies to those of you who genuinely feel completely fine without any celebration. No wounds, no pressure, nothing being suppressed. If that's you, that's valid too. Not everyone needs the same form of expression to feel whole. What matters is that you're not using calm as an excuse to distance yourself from yourself. Because there's a big difference between not needing something and not daring to receive it. Sometimes, what we call independence is really just a survival habit we've used for so long that we've forgotten what it feels like to lean on something. A birthday is just one moment that makes all of this more visible. Not the only moment, but enough to make us pause for a second. So if one year you feel like you want to be celebrated, you don't need to feel embarrassed or inconsistent about it. That's not regression, that's growth. And if another year you want to pass the day quietly, that's not failure either. It's simply a different form of honesty. Emotional maturity isn't about being perfectly consistent or always the same. It's about being able to respond in alignment with what's actually happening inside you. Maybe in the end, a birthday isn't a test of whether you're strong enough or chill enough. A birthday is a small invitation to check in with yourself, to ask, what phase am I in right now? What do I actually need? And has the way I've been treating myself been fair? We're often very sensitive to other people's needs. We know when someone else needs company, needs appreciation, needs to be celebrated. But when it comes to ourselves, we're quick to say, it's not important. When in fact, what we call not important might be the part of us that's been waiting the longest to be acknowledged. So if you're at a point in your life where your birthday feels like just another ordinary day, that's okay. And if you're at a point where your birthday feels heavy, that's okay too. What matters is that you're not lying to yourself about why. Because from that small honesty, you can start treating yourself in a gentler, more aware, more human way. In the end, the way someone views their birthday often mirrors how they view themselves. And maybe what we need most isn't a big celebration, not the spotlight, not applause. Maybe what we really need is simple recognition, that we exist, that we're growing, and that the journey so far deserves to be honored, even without noise, even without a stage. If you've made it this far and felt something in you quietly shift, that's already more than enough. If you want to share which type you relate to or what phase you're in right now, drop it in the comments, because we often feel alone when our stories are actually pretty similar. And if you enjoy content that unpacks human psychology slowly, honestly, and without judgment, you know what to do. See you in the next video.